Now, Voruna Prime is finally here. The first in a run of incredible Prime frames coming this year. Hopefully, right? Kalervo, Citrine, Styanax, and what we have now, which is Voruna. Now the big thing is that Voruna Prime's fort ability now actually lets her run on all fours like a proper wolf, which just fits her theme way better. It feels great, it looks great, and I know you're already saying it, it should always have been this way, and her base Voruna should more than likely have this as well, but it is of course a Prime feature that is only attached to Voruna Prime. Now, Voruna was already incredibly strong, and her Prime just gives her bonus stats. Voruna Prime comes with increased armor, energy, and sprint speed, as well as an extra V polarity. Now, when you combine that increased sprint speed with mods or weapons that give you additional sprint speed on top of that, she's even more fun. So, she hits like a truck, she can nuke rooms, and when you start spreading status around to everything, she becomes an absolute monster. So let's keep it simple and just jump straight to the point. These are the relics needed to farm Voruna Prime and her weapons. If you need relics, don't forget syndicates sell relic packs. So does Varzia, so does Teshin, so do the mining vendors for standing in places like Fortuna. And to farm these relics in missions, if you don't have the standing to buy them off any of those vendors and you want to run a mission and get your best chance of having these relics as rewards at the end, then the missions on screen right now are your fastest bet. So pause the video or click on the link in this video's description for the awesome relic cheat sheet that is up on Reddit. Now, Voruna's passive is tied to her 4 wolves, and each one gives her a different passive bonus depending on which one you need. You simply hold down that ability to channel it to activate that passive. Now, one of the passive boosts your parkour speed, one gives you full status immunity and knockdown resistance, one helps with heavy attacks, and the last one is basically a cheat death. Now, you can only have one passive active at any given time. The status immunity is the one that I tend to use a lot, simply because it saves you having to use a mod for that. But if you wanted to, you could use the heavy efficiency one if you're running with a heavy melee weapon. Entirely up to you. Now, her first ability is basically a stealth ability, right? It is also a movement tool, and also one of the reasons that she hits as hard as she does. You can go invisible, you can move faster, and then when you break that stealth with a melee attack, she will gain a really strong buff to crit and status, while also inflicting slash status effects on enemies, and a melee kill on an enemy during the time that you have this buff will extend the melee buff once per cast. Now, it is great for staying alive because you're going to be invisible, you're going to move that little bit faster, and it is one of her main survivability tools. Now, her second ability is where, I guess, her status spreading starts. She will basically pounce on a target, she will slap them with 5 random status effects that will have 10 stacks each, and when that enemy dies, all of those status elements on that enemy will spread to nearby enemies inside the radius of the ability, which is why you want to be modding for range. That's what makes Voruna so ridiculous. She is a kind of a priming Warframe. You are basically turning one enemy into a bit of a nuke that will then spread to feckin' everything else. This, for most people, is basically her best ability. You never want to get rid of this. Now, her third ability is pretty simple. You just cast it and kind of forget about it. Lycanth Hunt will basically allow you to kill enemies with melee attacks, will drop health orbs, and enemies killed by headshots from weapons will drop energy orbs. And you can increase the duration of Lycanth Hunt by killing enemies affected by 5 or more status effects, which her second ability does all the time. So you can have this up to a minute duration non-stop, constantly giving you sustain of energy and health orbs, and once you've got Equilibrium equipped, then this is going to keep her alive and keep her stocked up on energy non-stop. Then there is her fourth ability, and like I said, she now runs on all 4s, and you can pounce between enemies, do more damage, the more status effects that are already on those enemies, by spreading with your second ability and then pouncing with your fourth. And while this ability only gives you 5 charges or 5 attacks, she has got an augment that allows you to constantly replenish this, which allows her to run on all 4s and stay in that mode indefinitely. So again, her second ability, like I said, being her main ability, feeds into this. It spreads status effects around. You then pounce, do more damage, which means if you enjoy running around as a wolf, then this is the perfect playstyle for you. Now, I guess the rotation of abilities with Voruna and how you actually play her is pretty straightforward. You would basically keep her third active all the time. You would then go invisible. You would then spam your second on enemies so that you can spread status effects around, and then you would pounce on those enemies with your fourth. So you would then basically rinse and repeat while staying invisible as long as you can, or as much as you can, for that added survivability. Now that's pretty much Voruna Prime. She is an improvement on the base Voruna in everything from additional stats to polarities to that style of running around on all fours, which a lot of players really wanted for the longest effective times. Now in terms of how I went about modding her, these are the two builds I've gone for. Now, if you're a relatively new player to Warframe, or maybe you're still on the star chart and you've picked up Voruna Prime Access and you're wondering how you go about modding her just until you get the mods that you actually need, like the Prime mods and so on, then this would be the standard kind of default beginner build for most Warframes in the game. You basically want a mix of everything from duration, range, strength and efficiency, and if you can get any of the augments, then by all means you drop one of them in instead, but this would basically be a go-to kind of beginner setup. So this is pretty much my Voruna Prime build where I don't have anything subsumed onto it. I have gone for a mecha set with my Huras Kubrow. I've gone for overextended for range because range is her key stat, because you want to spread as many status effects to as many enemies as possible. I currently have a nearly 18 meter range. Then I've gone for flow for energy. I've gone for blind rage for strength. Ulfrun's endurance is going to allow me to keep the charges on my fort ability so that I can stay in that mode and just pounce around, killing as many enemies as possible. Archon stretch, of course, for energy regen. Equilibrium is going to allow me to sustain my health and my energy. Archon continuity is going to allow me to apply corrosive status whenever I do toxic. And then of course the Prey of Dinar augment is going to increase the radius of the spread from my Fangs of Raksh, which is your main ability, the second one, and it's going to allow me to keep that vulnerability by 50% as well. So this is kind of the go-to set I've been using at the minute. Like I said, I am using a Huras Kubrow with more mecha mods. If you wanted to, you could go for Brief Respite and Arcane Aegis here if you wanted to get rid of Molt Augmented. You could use any arcanes, any build you want. Once you're having fun, that's the main thing. Build to suit your own playstyle. There is no real need for a mod like Adaptation for the simple reason if you're using the passive on the Fangs of Raksh by holding the ability down, it makes you completely status immune to new status effects, not existing ones. So it won't cleanse status effects, but it will stop you getting new ones. Arcane Impetus again is going to increase my ability strength and my ability efficiency by the amount of status effects I've spread around, which is going to be a lot because of your second ability. But that's, like I said, pretty much my go-to setup right now. Now, maybe you want to mod her for Wrathful Advance, which is one of the, I guess, go-to subsumes for most Voruna builds out there. If you want to run with a heavy melee weapon, then you would mod her something along the lines of this. Now, I've gone for Brief Respite and Arcane Aegis just for a little bit of extra sustain. I've gone for Range with Cunning Drift. I've also gone for Archon Stretch for range and, of course, Energy Regen. Equilibrium, the same as the last build, basically for sustain. Mecha, just to keep my mecha mods going. Umbral Intensify for power strength. I've gone for Primed Flow for energy. I've gone for Blind Rage for power strength, and then I've gone for Prey of Dinar for that spread radius as well. So basically the playstyle of this is you would go invisible, you would then cast Wrathful Advance on your enemies, and then you will spread your Fangs of Raksh status around the place and just keep nuking enemies with your heavy attack. If you wanted to, you could use the passive for Lycan's Hunt, which is going to give you more heavy attack efficiency. You might want to get rid of this and put in Adaptation maybe instead, because you're no longer going to be status immune. So they're pretty much my two builds. Now, I'll be honest, I prefer the base setup to the Wrathful Advance. I don't run much Wrathful Advance for Voruna. I like running around on all fours, especially now that she can sustain that as much as possible. And she is quite fast with the buffs that the Prime has gotten. Now, this is pretty much my Huras Kubrow build that I've been using with my Voruna Prime. Like I said, with the mecha mods to spread my status effects to enemies inside 22 meters. Now, Vicious Bond is going to strip enemy armor. Hunt is going to basically charge into enemies and knock them on the ground, so it's crowd control. Vitality is self-explanatory for health. Duplex Bond is going to give me 3 clones. Now, these 3 clones can't use Contagious Spread, can't use Stalk or Fetch or any of those things, but they can attack, which means they will strip additional armor. Then I've gone for Stalk, of course, for that additional stealth. Synth Deconstruct is going to give me extra health orbs, which Equilibrium will feed off. Momentous Bond is going to give my companion extra elemental damage whenever you kill an Eximus unit. Then Contagious Bond is going to spread your status effects all around, so like a massive nuke. And then of course Fetch is going to pick up all of your loot. So this is the kind of go-to setup. If you're looking for one that's more loot orientated, you can always drop out one of the mods and drop in one of the loot mods or Animal Instinct or whatever you prefer. But that's Voruna Prime. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of her, if you've managed to farm one yet, if you're excited about the fact that she runs on all fours or not, what way you've built up. Have a great day, have a great week, and as always, thanks for watching.